All right, this is good. No, wrong one. Right one. All right. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Brachas, Perek Sheni. We are in middle of Halacha Aleph in the Oiz V'Hadar's edition. We are up to Daf Yutes. We left off on Daf Yut Ches, on Daf Chai Amid Beis, last line from the Amid. Firstly, we will learn more. We will speak more regarding how much of the Shema is connected to Kabbalah's Oil Malchus Shamayim, as we learned that Rabbeinu HaKadosh not only was by him the concept of Toirasai Umunasai, as we learned in the first chapter, relevant. On top of that, when a Jew like that level is teaching Torah, they certainly do not stop to recite the Shema, but with the exception that the part of Shema that's connected to Kabbalah's Oil Malchus Shamayim is something that they will interrupt their learning and teaching and recite. And indeed, as the Gemara pointed out, that Rabbi, in the middle of the class that started before the Zman Kriya Shema, that finished after the Zman Kriya Shema of the morning, there was always a time where Rabbeinu HaKadosh would cover his eyes or cover his face. That was the time in which he was saying the part of the Shema that's connected to Kabbalah's Oil Malchus Shamayim. The Gemara at least left off with the understanding that all he said was the first pasuk, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and the Gemara is going to continue this topic and clarify that Rebbe, during the time of his covering of the eyes, actually did, as we learned in the Braisa, he said all of the first three psukim of the Shema until the words Al Livavecha. It's only from the Vishinamtam onwards that someone on the levy of Rebbe did not need to recite. Then we're going to learn the big topic on Amud Aleph will be if one stops, pauses during the reciting of the Shema, and how long do they stop for? Kedei ligmoid eskula, the time it would take them to finish saying all of the Shema, whether they can continue from where they left off, or whether they have to go back all the way to the beginning. That topic won't only be discussed b'negei Kriya Shema, but we will also discuss this topic concerning reciting Hallel, concerning reading the Megillah, and as according to our Gemara will say, that Shema and Hallel and Kriyas Megillah is in one category, and that is, at least according to some opinions, you have to go back to the beginning. The exception will be the blowing of the shofar. We're speaking even only the blowing of the 9 sounds that one is mechoyef to blow midoy raisa, right? Tarat, tarat, tarat. That even if one made a interruption, doesn't matter as long as you blew it on the proper order. Even if you blew one sound during 1 hour and the other sound after the next hour, took you 9 hours to hear it, you will fulfill the obligation. And because we're going to go into the topic of shofar, we're going to have various inquiries, the sounding of the shofar, and coming back to this topic of if you paused, you made a hefsek by pausing in the middle of the Shema. Really, it's a machlokes between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yechanan, whether you have to go back to the beginning or whether you simply just pick up from where you left off. Now, on Daf Yutes Amid Beis, we're going to go on to the next halacha in the Mishnah that was about actually making a interruption by greeting someone during the Shema. As we spoke out when we learned the Mishnah, there's the Prakim and Be'emsa. You have a Shoyel, you have Meshiv, you have Kavod, you have Yira, you have Rav Meir, you have Rabbi Yehuda. As the Gemara will open up that topic, the Gemara is going to be discussing a very interesting topic, and that is whether it is presumptuous, therefore wrong, for a Talmud to greet his Rebbe. B'chlal. And it used to be the minig in Bavel that a Talmud would never greet his Rebbe. It would be considered something disrespectful. In Eretz Yisrael, it was okay to greet one's Rebbe, and that's going to lead us into a story that will start today, probably finish in the next year, how regarding Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lazar, how whenever Rabbi Lazar would come near Rabbi Yochanan, he was his Talmud, he would go into hiding, how Rabbi Yochanan would get insulted from it, and how Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi was able to be Matthias, was able to calm down and to get Rabbi Yochanan to understand Rabbi Lazar's perspective and therefore forgive him. So, Chaver, without any further ado, again, we're going back in the Ois V'Chadar's edition to Daf Yud Ches Amid Beis, all the way in the bottom of the Amid. The Rebbe used to cover his eyes while he gave a class. Another detail, during that year, since he did not say the Shema of Shema V'Ahavta V'Hoya V'Yomer, he would always direct his learning topic, B'Negeya something, B'Negeya Yitzias Mitzrayim, fulfilling the obligation of mentioning Yitzias Mitzrayim during the Zman of the reciting of the Shema. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Tav Yoimi Sha'al Rab Chizkiyahu. Hold on. Leis Hada Omra. Does this not tell us? Rabbi covered his eyes for a moment. She'ein Sarach Kavana El Pasuk Rishon Bilvad. And therefore, we just learned a Braisa that told us that you have to have the Kavana. The Kavana, not the Kavana of the Mishnah. The Kavana of knowing the meaning of every word in order for one to have the real Kabbalah's Oil Malchus Shemayim. That all of that goes until the fourth pasuk of Vishinamtam. It includes all the three psukim. Mashma that Rebbe only needed to concentrate during the first pasuk. And if you want, let's read the last line in the Amid in the Charedim, that Yud Ches Amid Beishuk, all the way in the bottom. Leis Hada Amra Hada Rebbe. That what? Only the first pasuk, because they eat Sarach Kavana B'Shar Kriya Shema, meaning up until Vishinamtam. Even though Rebbe was Teirasei Umunasei, and he was teaching Torah, nevertheless, Zu Torah was Zu Torah. Shema is also Torah. We had this in the first Pedic. However, he would not leave a Torah that is somehow more beloved. What Torah is more beloved? The part of the Shema for which you have to have Kavana, the part of Shema through which one is Mekabel Oil Malchus Shemayim. In the Charedim, Daf Yutes on the top, he would not continue teaching a level of Torah for which you don't need to have Kavanah. We're speaking about the Kavanah, not of not paying attention to what you're saying. He was giving a class. We're speaking about the Kavanah of Kabbalah Malchus Shemayim. And therefore, the Kasha is as our expression, the Ad V'Shinatam Tzarach Kavanah. Where did they get it from? From the story, it's mashma, you only need kavana. It sounded like Rabbi only covered his eyes for a moment, for the first pasuk. So the Gemara clarifies, no, you don't understand the story. Amalei, he responded, no. Now there's different girsa'os. The Pnei Moshe's goyed is Ado Yisana Ad V'Shinamtam, right? You have the girsa of the Charedim Abba Tenei Ad V'Shinamtam. In other words, look inside the Gavaldik Charedim. V'zeu Rab Chizkiyahu, who's this Abba? Lashon of respect. It refers to Rab Chizkiyahu, the son of Rab Chia. He was Masada the Braises. He learned the Brais above Ad V'Shinamtam Tzarach Kavana. V'zeu Sheshaga B'Fi Ha'olam. Indeed, you're learning good. You do have to have Kavana until V'Shinamtam. What does that mean? It means that when Rabbi covered his eyes during the class, he didn't cover his eyes, that was for a second or for 2 seconds, as you thought only the time needed to recite the first pasuk. That's not what happened. Rebbe would cover his face, he would cover his eyes for all of the time that he would need to recite the Shema and V'Ahavta and the third pasuk until Vishinamtam. Indeed, that's the amount of the Shema for which you need to have Kavanon. All right. Now, as we mentioned in our introduction, we're going to learn a lot today. Something that we also mentioned yesterday. If a person pauses in the middle of the Shema, when is there a point where they have to go back to the beginning? So opens the Gemara, and we're going to use the Girsa that it's Rav Muna Matavav. Rabbi Muna says, Mishum Rabbi Yuda, Sh'amar Mishum Rabbi Yosi Aglili, Im Hifsik Bakadei Likra, says Kulaf. One made an interruption, not that they spoke out other things. They simply paused. They paused the reciting of the Shema. But for how long? The time it would take them to complete the Shema. It's not the same share, because if you make a pause in the beginning, then you get away with a longer pause because you need more time. If you pause towards the end, then you can have finished it in a lesser amount of time. But if you paused in a place of your reciting where you could have finished the whole Shema, then lo yatsa yedei chayvase, meaning that it's not enough for you to pick up where you left off from. No, you got to go back all the way to the beginning. Got to go back all the way to the beginning. Now, let me go. Rabbi Ba, in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah b'shem Rav. You should know halachic Rabbi Muna, Shama Mishum Rabbi Yehuda, Shama Mishum Rabbi Yosei Galili. And now let's expand this. Not only is this the halacha, but Rabbi Yechanan b'shem Rabbi Shimon ben Yotzadok says same thing is with Hallel, and the same thing is with Kriyas HaMegillah, that if you made an interruption, you pause. If you could have finished the Hallel, if you could have finished the entire reading of the Megillah, then you have to go back all the way to the beginning. You can't just pick up from where you left off. Now, let's see whether this halacha applies also to the blowing of the shofar. Abba, Bar Rafuna, and Rab Chizda have Yosvin. And they suggested, after Tkiyas came. Now, it's very important to speak out that our Tkiyas midoiraisa, that Tkiyas midrabana. And we are speaking about to be yotzit the mitzvah doiraisa. As the Charedim points out, there are only 9 soundings. In other words, 3 sets of 3. Torah says 3 times teruah. We already know that teruah means tkiya before, tkiya afterwards. Tkiya, teruah, tkiya, tkiya, teruah, tkiya, tkiya, teruah, tkiya. Those 9 sounds are the soundings that one has to hear midoiraisa on Rosh Hashanah, and we will now l'chaura apply the same law. If you heard the sounds, but in between one and the other, how much time passed? Enough time for you to have heard all of the 9. Here again, chayzer l'roish. However, these 2 Amoraim, Salkin lebeis Rav and Vishamun, and they heard Rab Chuna quoting in the name of Rav that's not the case. By shofar is different. That filu shema on teisha shois. Even if you heard 1 every hour, you kidding? The whole thing 9 soundings can take a minute, 2 minutes, less. Even if you heard 1 sounding an hour, you're yoitza. Wow. In other words, shofar is different. Really, I just want to give a heads up. Really, we will learn. The end of the sugi will be there's a machlekes amoraim between Rabbi Yechanan and Rabbi Lazar regarding Shema, whether you have to go back to the beginning. But we have been learning now the shita that holds that we paskin that by Shema kedei likris eskula chayzel roish, and so by Hallel, and so by Kriyas HaMegillah, shofar is different. Now, why would shofar be different? Let me just give a suggestion, and that will be like this: that the reason why you can't make an interruption is because aside of saying the words that have to be said, aside of saying the words, I think there's some kavana. There's a certain momentum when we're speaking about kavana. You want to get into a certain space. Let's go to Hallel. You want to thank God. And we know how it is. So when you're thinking and you're contemplating about this miracle and that miracle, and you're getting into a more thankful mode, it like accumulates. There's a momentum. And we know how what an interruption like stops it. So there's a certain point where if you make such an interruption, you have to build up to something. And you're going to lose that build-up because of an interruption. That's the way I understand. Now, why would shofar be different? Like that, I understand. In that context, because there are certain parts of our neshama that are mamash l'mayla mahazman. They are beyond time. There is a certain part in us that is completely above time. Now, and I know that we're not always there. But since shofar is connected to the expression of your soul on a much higher level, you don't lose the momentum. You don't lose the momentum. It's like the yechida of a yid. When it's aroused, doesn't matter that we're 3,300 years away from Har Sinai. It doesn't make a difference. When the shofar arouses something, that man doesn't have the power to interrupt. Interesting concept. Let's go by. Says the Gemara, I want you to know that Amar Rab Ze'era, that the Ana Tamon, when I was over there, don't forget Rab Ze'era was the one that made Aliyah, right? We know that even from Talmud Bavli, like we mentioned. But when I was still there, tzrichasli, I needed to know this. Means I did not know this topic about the shofar. Does making an interruption invalidate the previous soundings or not? However, when I came here to Eretz Yisrael and I heard Shema Rabbi Yassin, the name of Rabbi Yechanan, that told me that shofar is different. Afilu Shema kol hayoyim, then you're going to be yoitz. And I mamish connect this. In other words, Eretz Yisrael is a place of higher kedusha. That this concept, the concept I get, talking about the experience I don't have, that you can hear shofar and hear an interruption and not lose the momentum. Wow, that's because you're getting in touch to a much higher level of your neshama. That's something that is a lot easier when you live in the Holy Land. And indeed, that was his experience. That's why in Babel he didn't know, and in Eretz Yisrael it became clear then. Now, there is, however, one caveat, and that is, even though Isman is not mafsik, but you have to hear it on the right order. This whole concept that life is really a tkiyah. True that people have a lot of brokenness in their life, but you have to put it in the right context. Tkiyah in the beginning, tkiyah at the end. Tkiyah is the good sound, the straight sound. True is the broken sound. So v'hu sheshaman ala seder. If you hear it out of sequence, then you won't be yoitze. Not because of the hefsek. Now, if you're not making a hefsek, why would you even hear it out of sequence? This is like a practical association. It's a practical. When I'm hearing something out of sequence, it's shaykh, and I'm going to miss the sound. I'm going to hear chveis teruah tkiyah. Then it's not good. It's tkiyah teruah tkiyah. Now that we mentioned shofar, we're going to have a couple of inquiries regarding shofar. Rabbi Yosef boi. Now the word boi we already had many times in the Yerushalmi in the beginning. In Bavli it means a boya, an inquiry, this side or that, two-sided question. In the Yerushalmi it can be a one-sided question, and actually sometimes the word boy means that he analyzed and he made a statement. Just to know, not every boy in the Yerushalmi is a question. This we're going to learn that this is takan inquiry, and that is like this: if one person, listen, you have Reuven is doing the blowing, Shimon and Levi have to hear. Shimon needs to hear the tkiyah prior to a truah, based on the fact you don't have to hear it all together. He already heard some sounds. Where is Shimon up to? He's up to the second stanza, but the first tkiyah. And then you have Levi that he already heard more before. Where is Levi up to? The latter tkiyah of the second stanza. Reuven doesn't know anything. Reuven is doing the blowing, but he's blowing for Shimon and for Levi. Each one needs to hear something else. So the question is, if this is an inquiry or whether this is a statement. That can be a statement. He said that one tkiyah is good for both. If it's an inquiry, I can understand the inquiry. You know, what's the shaila? Ishuki, if the mitzvah is lishmaya, which is the nusach of the bracha, then everyone heard. They heard what they needed to hear. If the mitzvah is to blow, particularly in the sugi, we're learning about kavana. The kavana of the first is not the kavana of the last, the kavana. And if the kavana is on the listener, no problem. Everyone has their own kavana. If the listener is on the blower, you can't have two opposites. You can't be. A kavana doesn't just mean to think words in your brain. It means to be there, to have that experience. Okay. So let's go that it was a statement, but now we're going to have the following kashas. Rabbi Oven barchia boyi, kriya shema ubir choiseha. Let's go back to the topic. We began all the hefsek by Shema. And at Khan, we only learned the shita that says that by Shema, you have to go back to the beginning. So he wants to know, do we say, as we learned yesterday, that whole topic, that Shema and its brachas are one unit? No, that's to the advantage of the person who's taking the pause. In other words, is it the amount of time that it would take me to read the Shema with its brachas, which is a much longer amount of time, and if I pause less than that amount of time, L'kula alma, I only have to continue from where I left off. Or no, there will be a chumrah. The brachas are not one unit with the Shema. That's what we learned yesterday. And therefore, it's from here until Hashem ani Hashem Elokeichem emes. And now let's go further. Let's go that if it's taka considered one unit, what happens if a person makes an interruption Not in the Shema, only in the brachas of the Shema. And how long was his interruption? The time that it would have taken him to finish the bracha after the Shema. Now that you have to go back, let's go. Do you have to go back to the Emes V'Yatzev, Emes V'Emunah, or do you have to go back to the beginning? Let's read inside the Charedim 7 lines before the end of the narrow lines. If it is one unit, now the kasha is and the hischal emes. You're middle of the emes, either V'Yatzev, Emes V'Emunah, and now v'shol l'gimna seifa, but you didn't go until the Agal Yisrael. The kiven the kfar kara kriya shema ein brachas din shah. There's no din of disposing by the brachas or dima after zeh shavu birchas se'alal. You have to go back to where you began. You have to go back to the beginning of Shema. You have to go back to the beginning of that bracha. That's a kasha without an answer. Back in the Gemara. Now hifsik shalisha. Charedim says boy acheres. Now I want to know if while you were a third into the Shema, you made a hefsek, but how long was your hefsek? The amount of time that it would take you to finish third, not ligmar skula, or smaller, and then you kept on reading, but you made another interruption. Now the Gemara doesn't speak out. Everything is brief in the Yerushalmi. Guys, 2/3 is not the whole thing. Obviously, it means, and then you kept on reading, and you stopped for a third time, obviously, and the third time you paused again. The time that it would take you a third. Now, do we combine these 3 interruptions, or do we not combine these interruptions? Let me go back to the words that we are suggesting, that there's a certain momentum that you build up when you say the Shema that puts you in a certain place. So what happens when you make a pause? Is pshat, you lose the momentum legamre, or you lose the momentum a little bit, so when you continue reading, you get back to where you were. If you get back to where you were, it doesn't matter. But if you never get back to where you were, then it accumulates. Oh. Now let's go to another inquiry. Now this will be resolved. It's whether the first one, Rabbi Yosef's boy is a machlokes between them first. Rabbi Oven Bar Chia for sure had 2 inquiries. 2. And now we're going to ask something. It's an inquiry, but we're going to respond to, and that is, how do you measure the length of this interruption? Is it bekoirei misha'arim? Is it, let's say a person is reading a slow reader on purpose. He's a slow reader because he doesn't know how to read, slow reader because this guy is really davening. Someone is davening. It takes this guy 10 minutes to say the Shema. It takes someone else 3 minutes to say the Shema. So how do we measure the interruption? Is it custom made to the reciter, or do we make an average? And on that, the Gemara says, for this I'll answer. Amar Rabbi Matanya mistabra b'koirei. And that I get. Mistabra is because if it's about the momentum that you are building up, then it's a personal thing. It's not a din. It's a certain place where you need to be. And every person is reading according to what they need. Oh. Zakti Gemara, Rabbi Bo asked Rabbi Yechanan, begin the Anno Kare Shema. He was the person that was reading Shema while he was walking. And even though we just learned yesterday that you're supposed to stand, as we explained, you're supposed to stand only in the first 3 psukim. But for the remaining of the Shema, Keshitas Beis Hillel, it doesn't matter what position you're in, and you can even be saying it while you're walking. But sometimes he goes through filthy alleyways, areas in which one, al pi halach, is not allowed to say words of Torah or tefillah, and therefore he's mafsik. Okay, and we're going to have that in the 3rd chapter here. So the question is, nafik ano yedei chayvasi? No, it's his interruption was kadei ligmar skula, but it was a forced interruption. Can I just pick up where I left off? Or no? Or if I just pick up from where I left off, I was not yoytzi yedei chavasi because I needed to go back to the beginning. So Amalei Rabbi Yechanan tells him, Abohu b'ni im mafsik ad kedei likres eskula, then lo yotzasi yedei chavasi. In other words, it doesn't matter why you made the interruption. And by the way, here we clearly see that Rabbi Yechanan agrees to what we learned above, other than Shofar. Okay, we don't see that he disagreed with Rav. But by Shema, Halal, and Megillah, at least by the Shema, he subscribes to the Shita, and I don't care why you made the interruption. An interruption is an interruption. Very good. So the Gemara, hold on. That Rabbi Elazar Salik Mevakra Rab Shimon bar Abba. Rabbi Elazar went to visit Rab Shimon bar Abba. Rab Shimon bar Abba was sick. His visit was a big Chaylim visit. And when Rab Shimon saw the great Amoyed Rabbi Elazar, Amalei, Rab Shimon bar Abba told him, hold on, I am so sick that whenever I'm reading the Shema, I don't have koyach and I doze off in the middle. Begin the anotosh because I'm weak. And when I read the Shema, it's common in my illness that I can't go from the beginning until the end. In the middle of the Shema, I'm misnam name. And it goes without saying, just to make it connected to our topic, he didn't doze off for 2 seconds. He dozed off the time that it would have taken him to finish the whole thing. Plus, that's the amount of time. We are just learning. Let's go back to Rabbi Elazar, who was a Talmud, and then he became a contemporary of Rabbi Yechanan. We just learned that Rabbi Yechanan paskin that you're not yoitze. So he asked Rabbi Elazar, "Nafik ano yidei chayvasi? Am I yoitze?" So Amar lei, Rabbi Elazar responds, "Yes, you are yoitze." Oh, now 1 second. One way to learn this is that Rabbi Elazar really agreed with Rabbi Yechanan. He agrees with everything we learned until now. You have to go back to the beginning. But he held it's a din in a lachatchila. That's one way of looking at it. Even though it says you're not yoitze lachatchila, you're not yoitze. And maybe Rabbi Elazar, because he's a choyle, he was unable. On one level, you're yoitze. That's one way of learning. The other way of learning is no, that he understood the opinion of Rabbi Yechanan, you're not yoitze at all. And he is giving you a din lachatchila, not even because you're ill. In other words, is there a machloikis Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yechanan? That's what we're trying to figure out. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yirmiyah ba'ah. This is an inquiry in front of Rabbi Zajac. Help me understand Rabbi Elazar. Begin the Rabbi Elazar Yoda, right? Did he give this psak din even though he knew that Rabbi Shimon bar Abba was medagdek mitzvahs sagin? He was very careful in mitzvahs. Why is that important? Because when someone is sick, and you could be lenient, Shuki, if that individual is a very medagdek in mitzvahs, they don't want to have leniencies because of chayla. In other words, even though he knew he's a medagdek with mitzvahs, and therefore he would not want to rely on any kul, on any b'di'evet because he's a chayla, and nevertheless chayla. Why? Because Rabbi Elazar would have told it to him even if he's healthy. Because Rabbi Elazar argues with Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Elazar will hold that it doesn't matter if you made a hefsek at Eilik Meraskula. Or is it only, I begin to Tasha Shayale? Look inside the final Pnei Moshe and the Amid before you turn to Amid Beis. Kalayim, im mashu hu hoira, right? That sheyatsa yidei chavasei. Afa pisha mafsik ba. Was that a hoira zu ledinahi? He's paskening sharei hu yodeya that Rab Shimon bar Abba was medagdek harba mitzvahs. Umachman alatz. If I feel achar loikach, im kain lahalocha siril Rabbi Elazar kain. Oy dilma no. Only because Rab Shimon bar Abba was tosh koyachu v'leyoy rotza latrichoy. Maybe he wasn't even chayv to begin with. Maybe even better. He did not mechoyim. Does he agree or does he not agree with Rabbi Yechanan? Now we can turn to that few Testament days. So Amalei. So Rabbi Zajac clarified that the Fedish Pligin. No, they mamish argue that Rabbi Elazar Amar Yer Yoitze. In other words, all you need to do is to resume where you left off. Of course, if you don't resume from where you left off, you're not Yoitze. You don't have to go back to the beginning. Rabbi Yechanan is the one that says you're not yoitze. Wow. So we actually conclude that it's a machlekes Rabbi Yechanan and Rabbi Elazar. And now the Gemara says, my peligin. What are they arguing about? B'kriyas Shema. In other words, don't say that they are arguing also in Shofar and Hallel. Don't say that they're arguing in Hallel and Megillah. They're not. Hallel is written in scripture altogether. Tehillim. Megillah says that. It's written in scripture. Shema is not written in the Torah altogether. You have a Schanan, you have Ekev, you go back to Shlach, right? You go back to Parshas Tzitzis. It's Gavalda. So the Gemara is saying that the reason why Rabbi Elazar is not worried about an interruption, that's only by the Shema. Because in the Torah, it's not written all together. The only argument by the Shema. Shema is composed of different passages. Memela, since the Torah does not put it together, he doesn't subscribe to this whole building up of a momentum. No. You read every parsha. And by the way, you have to go more than that. Even if I'm reading Ve'ohavta and I made an interruption in somewhere and I took an interruption, also doesn't matter. But the fact that the Chachamim put together different passages is a raya with Rabbi Lazar that you're not building up to anything. Certain things have to be said. You said it, like my show, you said it, you did it. Aval ba'halach is a megillah. Oof, Rabbi Lazar will be moidem to Rabbi Yechanan. Beautiful. Okay, moving on to the second din in the Mishnah, and that is greeting. Ube'emtza sholem pnei hayira, quoting that one-liner of the Mishnah, if you have it in the brackets. So, when we mentioned yira, we spoke out. Well, who's yira? It's not only yira from someone who's going to kill you if you don't answer or greet, because we don't need a Mishnah for that. Pikuach nefesh. Yira means that there are certain people who al pidin you're chayiv to give honor to, a rebbe and a father, and to them that's the Mishnah. That's the mepnei hayir. Oh, and now, if you want to use a rebbe as an example, what would that imply? That if you see your rebbe, you should greet your rebbe. Like we mentioned in the introduction, the culture in Bavel used to be that it's presumptuous for a Talmud to greet a rebbe. I can relate to this as a Chabad chassid. That the minute when the rebbe came in, it was very presumptuous to go over to the rebbe. Shalom aleichem rebbe. People didn't do it. They did it if they needed the bracha, and many people would only do it if they needed the bracha for someone else. For themselves, they wouldn't. It was chutzpah. You don't stop the rebbe. You don't greet the rebbe. If the rebbe greets you, you bet you respond. And that will lead up to a story. Says the Gemara Tanei. We learned in a brayso that hashoyel b'shloim rabbi, if you greet your rebbe, oy b'mishu who got him in the Torah, yes, sorashus b'yadoi. Not the way the Bnei Bavel were noyeg. It's not considered an affront. Nice. You are allowed. Now here's the catch. Here's the hook. If you are allowed, you're mechuyev. See, everyone has to be mechaber the rebbe. There's no debate about that. You're not greeting him was because it looked at as something disrespectful. So therefore, the Gemara says, Hada Amra, now I'll tell you, based on this brayso, that you are allowed. There's no, once you are allowed, boom, you're chayiv. If you are allowed, then you're mechuyev. Reading inside the Chareid in the middle of the Amid, the Kivin, the Ashma'in, the Reshoy, the Ainz, the Zuludav, all the Kavay, me Noshma'in, the Chayiv, L'chvei Torah. Now, hold on. The Bnei Bavel, we said they found it disrespectful. So the Gemara is not happy here in Yerushalmi to quote one brayso. We're going to quote another proof. No, we want to disprove the minig of Bavel. It's important to have more than one brayso. I'll give you another proof that it's not disrespectful to initiate a greeting to your Rebbe. The Tani we learned in another brayso, and now we're going a whole different topic, and that is like this: that one of the steps that one has to do after one loses one's close relative, father, mother, God forbid, brother, sister, son, daughter, spouse, is renting one's garments. Kriya. Interesting case. It's sad. It's tragic, but just the concept that when people pass away, you don't know exactly when they pass away. What were to happen if someone appeared that they passed away, and the close relative, not the way our minig now is you do kriya by the kura, they would do kriya by the passing, as halach is really. They did kriya, and then they chaf, the person is still alive, and then they passed away. Do you have to do kriya again? Now, we learned many times in other topics the concept of toich kedei dibur. Toich kedei dibur means that when I make a transaction and I can normally retract toich kedei dibur, that's because the transaction only goes into effect la'achar kedei dibur. Now, let's use this logic over here. If a person did kriya, the relative was still alive, but they passed away toich kedei dibur. Here we're going to say, Lakula, your kriya was only chal la'achar kedei dibur. So it was chal after the passing, you're good. Let's read it inside. Now you can learn the Braisa not the way I said it. You can learn the Braisa. Person passed away. They died, and then they came back, and now they died again. That's the literal meaning. Let's go with that. Doesn't make a difference. Point is that you writ kriya prior to the second passing. Okay, second passing. It sounds Christian. No, second passing. Oh, v'chazra by neshama im alasar. Im alasar means that the person writ kriya before the passing, but it was immediately before the passing. And it's tzarich l'kraya. You don't have to do it again. But the im alachazman tzarich l'kraya. Now the Braisa has to define what's this immediately. The kamahu alasar kedei dibur. It's amazing. Now, literally, the words kedei dibur, the time that is required to make a statement. Okay, first of all, you got the din. Now, when we explain that Braisa, we have this kedei dibur in many other places. All of them will be the same proof, right? We already know what's kedei dibur, shalom alecha Rebbe, or shalom alecha Rebbe yomoidi. That's a raya that you can greet your teacher. You can argue it's not such a raya. You can argue that when your Rebbe greets you, you have to respond. But normally you respond aleichem shalom. In fact, you're saying shalom aleichem, that means you're initiated. Now, v'kam u'kedei dibur, Rab Simon b'shem Rabbi Shua ben Levi, kedei she'ilah shalom min adam l'chaveiroi. That's one answer. And what is that? But adam l'chaveiroi, we only have to say the words, 2 words, shalom aleichem. However, Abba bar Chana, in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, says, no, kedei she'ilah shalom min Rav l'talmud. Now, when it says min Rav l'talmud, it's not clear who's initiating, but now it becomes clear. The time that it takes a student to tell the teacher, Shalom Alecha, our version is only Rebbe. There's another girsa, Rebbe Yomoidi, but let's go with the Rebbe. So what's the raya, Gavaldi? Is a raya, at least from Rabbi Yechanan, learning Pshat in the Braisa, that a Talmud can greet the teacher. So it's amazing. Notice we didn't even begin to analyze the Mishnah. Well, Yira also includes a Talmud Rebbe. So that is the topic. And now let's learn a phenomenal story, and let's see how far we can get. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Yechanan have a mistamich al Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi. Rabbi Yechanan, which as we know from Bavli, was very large, big Ashmias. It's difficult for him to walk without someone helping him. And who merited to be the one upon whom Rabbi Yechanan would lean on while walking was Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi, which gave him the greatest opportunity of real shimush, chachamim, and to learn. Oh, so here's the story. That what happened was that Rabbi Lazar was near them walking. Rabbi Lazar saw, we already had this word so many times, he saw Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Lazar was a Talmud of Rabbi Yechanan. What was his reaction when he saw Rabbi Yechanan? Not only did he not go to greet him, more than that, umitamar min kodomoi, he would hide from him. I'm so familiar with Guy Shuki. That's how it was. That ever walked in, people would run away. And Rabbi Yechanan, who noticed that, was very disappointed. And he expressed himself to Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi that karte milin hadein bevaloi avali. This Babylonian, Rabbi Lazar, came from Bavel. All right, he went from there to learn by Rabbi Yechanan. He says this Babylonian is committing 2 offenses against me. This one that you just witnessed, chada deloishal b'shleimi. Now, really, this one in itself, you can say, is a double whammy, because not only did he not greet him, he ran away. But he didn't greet me. And another thing, that whenever he quotes a teaching that he heard from me, he doesn't do the b'shem amrei. Okay, now you have to know how to be mafias, and that was a greatness of Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi. Nah, he doesn't mean it. He doesn't this it. He doesn't that it. He's talking to him and learning. Amalei kach inu nahagen gabeim. I want you to know that first of all, that the Metzias is like we spoke out that in Bavel, the minig was, the understanding was, the culture was, is that a Talmud never greets a Rebbe. What meaning? Ze'era, a little one, loishol b'shlomei derabah. Based on what? The inun mikaimin This is a statement that Eov was making when he was going through his terrible tzaras, lamenting his days of glory, lamenting how it used to be. Eov said it used to be that when the Na'arim saw me, they would hide. Why would they hide? Because young don't greet the elderly. When he was undergoing through tzaras, no one gave him covet. So the fact that he lamented, I missed those times when the youngsters would hide from me, is that's the right thing to do. Now hold on. Obviously, it wasn't enough. Rabbi Yochanan wasn't yet fully consoled. Guys, we have tables in the sukkah. We just need people to bring them in. Now, Mahalchin, you have to just learn how to read the Yerushalmi, not who is walking. While they were walking, whoever's using the art scroll is having an easy time over here. But just to appreciate it, it's a whole different way of talking. While they were walking, Rabbi Yaakov Aridi showed Rabbi Yochanan a Beis HaMedrash. Amalei, and said Rabbi Yaakov to Rabbi Yochanan that Hachi Aved of Meir Yosef Adarish. Here in this Beis Medrash was where Rav Meir used to expound. He used to teach. Then he added these words to him that V'Amar Shmu Asam and Shmei de Rabbi Yishmael. Whenever Rav Meir was quoting a teaching from Rabbi Yishmael, he would say it in his name. But whenever he was quoting a Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva was his main teacher. And he never, Rabbi Akiva said, only if he quoted Rabbi Yishmael did he quote Rabbi Yishmael. When he quoted the teaching from Rabbi Akiva, so Rabbi Idi criticized Rav Meir. Rabbi Yochanan defended him. Amalei, what are you talking about? Kol Alma Yadin, everyone knows that Rav Meir was a Talmud of Rabbi Akiva. In other words, the whole thing of Omer Lev B'Shem Omerai is when you don't know who he's teaching it from. If everyone knows it's coming from his main teacher, as they knew, he doesn't have to say it. Now we got him. So Amalei, so Rabbi Yaakov Aridi told him, Kol Alma Yadin, the Rabbi Lazar Talmid, and Rabbi Yochanan. We're not done yet. Because like we mentioned, it wasn't enough for him to tell him that, like from Eov, that in Bavel they don't greet the teacher. Rabbi Yochanan was upset that he ran away. So he wasn't the fight. What's the running away business? That was not addressed. The next will address it. Now, he asked him a halachic question. Me'evur kumei adurei tzilmei. Is one allowed? What should you do when you pass in front of an idol? In other words, we're not allowed to show any respect to an idol. So he says, should we just walk by it? Should we walk away from it? Should we not even walk near it? So Rabbi Yochanan says, no, walking away from it is not good. Walking in front of it and not showing respect is the biggest disrespect. You don't have to run away from an idol. In other words, don't feel that when you see an avodah zarah, you have to walk away from it. No. Avoid kumai v'sami yene. Dafke walk in front of it. You blind its eyes by not giving it covet. Now it's gavaldik. Now we got it. Rabbi Yaakov Aridi already showed Rabbi Yochanan that in Bavel, a Talmud will not greet the teacher. But now you have to understand something. Walking by someone and not showing any respect is the biggest disrespect. So even though he couldn't greet him, at least he would run away. That's the pshat. Rabbi Lazar Yos Avid will say he did good. Yos Avar. Why are you upset with him? So now he fully resolved really all of the three things. Greeting, he doesn't greet, he's from Bnei Bavel. Walking and not greeting is the biggest disrespect. Not quoting you, that's because everyone knows that he's your Talmud. So now, Amalei, Zok, Rabbi Yochanan, Yaakov Aridi, Yodei Atlafai is Gavaldik. You know how to be a feist. Now I'm good with Rabbi Lazar. Now we are in the middle of the story. God willing, we're going to pick up over here on the bottom. A lot more to come. Yashir Koyach.
Koyach, Rabbi.